Hi, I'm Bert,
And I'm Ernie.
and this is Budget Nerds.
It was all in your mind.
You are not alone.
No, you are not. Well, today, once again, we're going to get very nerdy and we're going to talk about categories. I felt like we talked a lot about categories in the past, and we've gone over yours and my category, I think, multiple times.
We've talked so much about categories, and the nerds just can't get enough. They love their categories, but understandably so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's those categories that really reflect our actual priorities. And so, of course, we're going to be thinking about them all the time.
And they're just so much fun to tweak and play with. I mean, probably always the most popular posts in various YNAB communities is share your categories. I think on Reddit there's like a pinned regular monthly post where people just share their categories, and people talk about
Okay.
that a lot. So it's just a thing. And
Yeah, I get the question all the time in the live Q&As. Hey, do you have a template of the categories that you're using in this demo?
yeah, and yeah, we've been working on stuff like that. So we might be able to do something like that in the future. Just a little tease there, but yeah, there's a lot there, a deep mine to mine, and we've talked about our categories in past episodes. We'll probably do it again, but right now, I think we want to talk about just some general category structures that a lot of people use. And this isn't like getting into the weeds of the specific category. We're talking about category groups, right?
Yeah, the high level here.
Yeah. So maybe you're like me. I'm Ernie. I've been feeling a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting bored and I just want to change my budget around. But
You
I've
just
been.
made a fresh start.
I know that was the time.
Already bored with the
I
new
know.
budget?
That was the time to change my categories, but I kept the same structure. But that's one thing that's nice is unlike when you have transactions and stuff, you can move the categories around in groups all the time and it doesn't change anything. So I'm thinking about making a change. So maybe this discussion will help me decide. But yeah, so let's get into some high level category structures that people often use and we'll dig into it. Let's start with the default, the YNAB default.
Well, there's actually two YNAB defaults right now. I think we need to point that out. So
That's true.
if you start a new budget in the web app, you're going to be getting immediate obligations, true expenses, debt payments, quality of life goals, and then just for fun.
Yeah, and the reason why that's there in the web app is because we haven't changed it yet. So that was the old defaults. I think it's been pretty much the same since the new YNAB launched in 2016.
I think so.
And yeah, that will be changing in the web app, but right now that's what we have. So yeah, but the new defaults, if you start a new budget on the mobile apps, are bills, frequent, non-monthly, goals, and quality of life. And I think it's kind of interesting. The big idea there in the change was to use more plain language, because I think we have a lot of like kind of insider baseball. If you're a YNABber, you know these terms, but when you first start a new budget, you don't know what the heck we're talking about. What's a true expense? Right, exactly. So yeah, that was one of the biggest changes. We changed that to non-monthly, and we tested this like extensively. Like people looked at the term true expense, and they had no idea what that means it's no wonder because we made it up, right? But then you look at non-monthly, and people immediately understood and actually started budgeting for non-monthly expenses. So just that one change, people understood Rule 2 almost right away. So that was a big deal. That was a good change.
Okay, do you know any stories behind the frequent group? Things like groceries, transportation, eating out.
Because
in my mind, I think it's because those are the ones we're obviously frequently spending from, and so it's just a quick way to access those category balances, kind of group them all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think.
But I don't know if there was something else.
No, I think that's kind of the idea. It's just categories you need to glance at a lot, and so they're there close to the top and they're all together. I think it's kind of nice. But yeah, like the old structure, immediate obligations, true expenses, debt payments, quality of life goals, just for fun. That was basically just our prioritization process all the way down the line. Like take care of your immediate needs first. Immediate obligations with stuff that happens every month and is like important, right? And then true expenses is next, and then debt payments, and that's kind of a, us pushing that little thing there. Now, debt payments, your minimum payment is really an immediate obligation itself, but we're saying extra on debt would be the third priority there, and then like quality of life. What would you say is the difference between quality of life and just for fun? Because that's kind of a that's there's a line that's hard to walk there.
Yeah, I think, boy, it's been a while since I've used this structure, but quality of life, I'm thinking like a vacation,
Uh-huh.
right? And or maybe not. In my mind, quality of life is vacation. Just for fun is something like personal spending category for my wife and
Yeah,
myself.
to my mind, just for fun is just like kind of in the moment happiness, like it's like long-term happiness versus in the moment happiness. Like eating out would be just for fun, but yeah, vacation or maybe saving up for like a new puppy or something like that, that would be quality of life. It's more of a longer term goal, and we just changed that. Now we just have goals and quality of life. And I think quality of life fits really well with dining out too, so I think that makes more sense now too.
And I remember when I started YNAB, just really appreciating those groups right off the bat, because it laid out that prioritization schedule. All right, I got to focus on the bills, the immediate obligations, and then I was training myself to prepare for those true expenses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it flowed as the money came in.
Yeah, it does make sense. But I'm glad that we have this new change because the terms are a lot easier to understand
Oh,
and
I
people get
love
it
them.
right away. So
Yeah.
when you see bills, you know exactly what to put in that group, right? You see non-monthly, you know exactly what to do. So it's just a little more plain and easier to understand. So that's why we made that change, and that should be coming to the web app eventually.
And so, yeah, there is nothing wrong with those defaults. You can keep them the entire life of your budget. And I think that's what you're doing now.
Yeah,
right?
I use the defaults. So when I remember when I think I used something else. Actually, I carried over the defaults from YNAB 4. That's what I did because I kind of kept the
Whoa.
same. Yeah, they were. I don't even remember what they were anymore. But it was actually a little bit more like this. It was more based on the frequency of the expenses, I think. But then when I came on and joined YNAB as a teacher, I wanted to like really get ingrained in the defaults, and so I changed it to my own budget to the defaults, and I use
Do you
that.
still have?
No, actually, along the same line, when we got the new defaults, I changed it to that. So that's what I'm using right now, along with some extra random stuff that I need. So
Okay.
but I'm getting a little bored with the default now. I think I might want to change it up. So we can talk about that.
Well, maybe you can be inspired by one of these others.
Yeah.
So the next one we want to talk about here is fixed versus flexi. So fixed, those are the ones, you're required to pay on time and in full. Rent, cell phone bill, things like that. And then the flexi, obviously, there's some flexibility there. So, variable amounts, no due dates. You don't have to fund that category necessarily. I'm thinking like a home maintenance or eating out could be a flexi category.
And Hannah's a big fan of this one. She talks about it a lot in her videos. And yeah, like I think the big test of whether it should be fixed or flexi is, can you take from that category? Can you rule 3 that category? I mean, if it's something like a electric bill, you're not going to take money from there because you need it, right? And it's important. But maybe it's groceries or dining out or something like that. It's a little bit like the amount doesn't matter so much. You might not necessarily even fund it fully every single month, and that would go in flexi. And then also Hannah in her video, she did a while back. She did a video on a few different category structures. She talked about she also had a savings category group, and that's where she put all her non-monthly categories as well.
My problem with this method is that there's too few groups, and so because I have right around 50, I think, categories.
Right.
And so my groups would be so big and there'd be so much scrolling and trying to find those specific groups. I don't know. I just don't think I could do it.
Yeah. I know what you mean. It's a little bit, well, we're probably just too nerdy. We have too many categories probably, but that might be part of it. I think it's really good when you're brand new and you're kind of getting used to rule 3, and you just want to be sure that you don't take money from something really important, so you can always know, hey, these categories in this flexi group, good to take from, no matter what.
That's really a great point. That like the style, the way you're organizing the budget now doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same way you're going to use the budget, organize it in the future. You know, because as those seasons change, as our views on money change, all of that, you know, we want to look at it differently in the budget. And so, yeah, you starting off, maybe that fixed Flexi makes a lot of sense. Get comfortable with the method, your budget, and then you're like, I think I want to rearrange it a little bit.
Yeah. So give it a try, especially if you're new or if you're struggling with Rule 3. Maybe give that a try. Other people do like a meta category group thing. Like they have their own category group structure, but then they'll do like emojis. Like they put like a little X emoji if it means don't take from this category. You know, so there's other ways to kind of mark categories as, you know, this is not a Rule 3 option. You know. Let's move on to budgeting by paycheck. I think this is super helpful if you're starting out and you haven't had a lot of time to age your money and work on Rule 4 and getting a month ahead.
And a case where you have that regular expected paycheck, right? Every 2 weeks, twice a month, whatever the case may be. And you organize your groups. Okay, first paycheck pays for or saves for these expenses, right? Second paycheck, list of categories.
Yeah. And I think this really works for a lot of people when they're new because, you know, if you're coming to YNAB, you're probably in the paycheck to paycheck cycle. And so you've already probably created a structure where certain bills are due at certain times because, you know, this paycheck needs to cover these bills. And so it kind of meshes with people's existing mental model if they are in that situation where they're paycheck to paycheck and they have to be really careful about timing bills to paychecks and all that. So this is another one where it's like, if you're new, definitely, and you have really predictable income and you have more than one paycheck a month, I would really recommend it. I think it's super helpful. And it's not like you have everything under a paycheck category. Like you have paycheck 1, paycheck 2, and then you might have like savings goals and other stuff like that. But just having at least those 2 category groups for each paycheck can be super duper helpful.
So the next way is by theme. And this is actually what I do with my budget. I believe this was inspired by our conversation with Nick True.
Oh, yeah.
All those months ago. And we're actually going to talk about the method that he introduced. And so it just sparked, I think, something in me where, you know, I break all my expenses out by, so the theme, home ownership, you know, home, house, whatever the case may be. And then all the house categories, auto, entertainment. And I still have you know, there are some categories that just don't fit a particular theme. And so I just put them in a monthly. And then I also have a non-monthly group as well. But boy, yeah, I mean, most of my money's going towards the house, right? Going towards the auto.
Right.
And I kind of like seeing that in the budget. How much money do I actually have tied up in these various themes?
Well, if you're somebody who's really into reporting, this is great because you can just easily filter those categories and say, okay, how much am I spending on my car? Some people I've seen even have separate auto maintenance group per car. So if they have 2 cars, they'll have 2 separate auto maintenance groups or categories. And that way they know, okay, on this car, I'm spending about this much. And on this car, I'm spending about this much. And so you might even have separate groups for them. Yeah, that would introduce more work, but you get a lot of insight in your reports. So
I think it's a really easy way to also roll with the punches. If I overspend in some sort of, you know, house category, well, I want to pull that from another house expense.
Yeah, I like that. You know, I'm actually drawn to this as my option too for changing up my categories. I think one of my frustrations with my categories right now is it's just difficult to find categories. I kind of have what you were talking about with the fixed versus flexi. I have a lot of categories in certain groups, and then other groups I don't have very many. And so it could just be kind of a pain, like searching for a category. I think if I went by theme, first I'd have more category groups. So I think I would be able to organize it a little more granularly, you know, but also, you know, if I'm looking for something related to the car, I just go to the car group, you know, so I wouldn't have to, I don't know, just be quicker, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about your giving group or category, however it's set up right now. I mean, that's a new focus, you know, for you and your wife. And so you could really dial that in.
I actually
here's our
have
group.
a giving group right now.
Okay.
And so in addition to the defaults, so yeah, I'm already almost halfway there because there are a few places where I do have themed groups. Like I have one for childcare, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of
all right. Done deal. After the recording, no work for you. Reorganize the budget.
It's funny. I feel like sometimes I'm like, I'm like working on my personal budget like during work time, and I feel a little bad about that. But it's also like like it's kind of work. It's all
Research.
it's research. Yeah, it's all related, right? And then anyways. So yeah, I'll just spend the rest of my work day today just working on my own budget, and I'm just doing some research, guys. It's cool.
You would get into total deep work mode though. Like you would just be dialed in.
I would. Yeah, maybe I should just do it, because the beauty of it, changing your category structure, like I said, it doesn't affect the transactions at all or anything. So you can move categories around like crazy, and you can just put it back if you want, and it's not going to be a big deal. It's not like you're making a new budget file or anything. So
yeah, we talk a lot about banking a fresh start, but a lot of folks don't want to do that because they don't want to lose that data. I totally get that. Just rearrange the budget, right? Take all the money out of your categories, restructure, and then reprioritize.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. Oh man, I'm gonna have like another mini fresh start here. But all right. Well, I'm thinking I'm gonna go by theme, but maybe I'll try it and see what I think.
Yeah, we still have a few others here.
We do have a few others, and these get a little more interesting. Frequency of expenses. So this is kind of like the default a little bit. But yeah, so it'd just be like, okay, you have certain categories that are every day, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and then a special group where it doesn't fit into any of the rest, right? And that's probably going to be more like one-off expenses, like a home down payment, like big goals you're saving for, right?
Okay.
I like this. Actually, this is a lot like the defaults in YNAB 4, if I recall correctly, because I think there was like an everyday group, and then like a monthly group, and then like a non-monthly group. So I kind of like that. Yeah.
Do you have any daily expenses?
That's actually a good point. I'm like, what's a daily expense? I guess you can think of it like just like almost like an everyday expense. Like it's not going to happen necessarily every single day, but it's kind of random. Like groceries would be a good example. If you are a person who doesn't do like grocery planning and goes to the grocery store like
sure, you're stopping after work,
right? Yeah, that kind of
work lunch, parking, tolls, coffee,
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, okay. Tolls. Yeah, travel. Yeah, gas. It's not necessarily like stuff you're going to spend every day, but it's going to be just random times. So it's more like a random week or random interval kind of a thing. And then weekly would be. I don't have a lot of weekly bills, like actual bill that's weekly. But it might be things that like maybe you just very predictably get gas once a week. You could put it on that.
Yeah,
it's that kind of thing.
All right, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, next one I want to talk about is a Japanese method. I was just introduced to this called Kakeibo.
Oh.
And actually, one of our product managers here at YNAB mentioned, and I think in the personal finance channel in Slack, that they're trying this. They started a new budget in 2022 and going with the Kakeibo method.
Yeah.
And so the idea here, I was completely unfamiliar, so I had to do a little bit of research, but there's 4 groups. There's needs, wants, culture, so things like books, sporting events, right? Music, concerts, and then the unexpected group. So I think that would be our version of true expenses.
Yeah, I really like this because I do like needs and wants. I think for a lot of people that can be helpful early on. Sometimes I struggle with it because in truth, like everything's a need and everything's a want. Like because it's just not binary. You know what I mean? Like, you need food, but you want to go to a fancy restaurant, right? It's like there's always like a sliding scale in there, and so that's why I feel like I struggle with needs and wants, because I don't know, it's just hard to pin down sometimes.
Well, and so many times money, well, maybe all the time, it's just emotional, and
right.
Boy, I don't know. It's kind of tough, like seeing some of those categories and money in the needs, thinking, well, or the wants, but I'm like, boy, that feels like a need right now.
Right.
I don't know.
Sometimes people say, "Oh, I need this thing." What they really mean is, I think this is really important, and that's good. I feel like sometimes people say like, "Oh, well, this thing, I really want it, but it is a want, so I shouldn't get it." And I think that's the problem. If it's something that's really a big priority to you, that's a big priority to you. It's okay to go for it.
Yep.
So yeah, I struggle with needs and wants sometimes, but I do think it can be helpful, especially early on when you are really, maybe you're struggling with overspending just in general, and you have like I have a spending problem. I really need to dial this in. I think early on it can be super helpful to kind of identify needs and wants.
And it's a real simple way to organize the budget. So, yeah.
And then culture is super interesting. I really like that idea because it's not like a fleeting entertainment like restaurants. It's kind of more like enriching, you know?
Yes, enriching. That's the perfect word.
That's the word. Yeah. Books, sporting events, concerts.
It's a
what
very
else?
aspirational category group.
Yeah. So it's like entertainment, but it's not as fleeting. Or it could be even something that's not entertaining, like maybe like an education thing that's just gonna improve your mind or that kind of thing. And I like that. I like calling that out as a separate group because it kind of brings some more importance to it. And I think that's kind of neat. And then unexpected, of course, is well, that's right up our alley, isn't it? Roll two.
Rainy day funds, sinking funds, true expenses.
Yeah. So Kakeibo, look it up. Maybe we'll put the name of it in the description so you know how to spell it. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, the next one here, this is for partners that have a lot of accounts. Maybe not even a
Yes.
lot, but there's a different structure to the account. So, partner one has their separate accounts, partner two has their separate accounts, and then maybe together you have one or a few shared accounts. Well, what do you do with all those accounts? You can build a category structure around them. And one of the ways to do that is with the groups. So you would have, in this example, partner one would have their own group, right? So all the money from the partner one separate accounts goes into the partner one group. And then you have the partner two accounts associated with the partner two group, and then shared accounts with the shared expenses group.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, it's this is kind of born out of necessity. If you're using the same budget file and you have both joint and separate accounts, you have to have some kind of way to separate those categories. So
It takes a lot of work, right?
yeah,
Because there's a lot of accounts and you got to make sure those are always matching with the bank, those balances,
hmm
and then just making sure that the money gets into the right categories and groups, right? Because the accounts aren't attached to the
right.
groups or categories.
You have to make that attachment yourself, so it can be a little
Yeah.
tricky. I kind of prefer. So there's lots of different structures when you're with a partner. That's the two simplest ones is where everything's together, and you just consider both of your incomes, your shared money, and you make decisions together, and you have all your accounts together. And then there's all your accounts completely separate, and then you could just have separate budgets, and you're just doing your own thing with your separate accounts and separate budgets. But when you mix it, you have some joint and some separate. That's when it can get a little bit complicated. I kind of prefer if I were in that situation. My wife and I share our accounts, so we don't have we're more on that simpler side. But if I was in that situation, I think I would probably actually use separate budget files. Like I'd have three.
Really?
Yeah, I struggle with it because it is a little more work because you'd have to like switch between different files. But yeah, I'd have one for my personal accounts, one for my wife's personal accounts, and one for our joint accounts. And I don't know, it just seems cleaner to me than trying to put it all in one budget file.
Oh, I would definitely use the structure that we just went through.
Okay.
I just want that one budget file.
Yeah,
And
because it would be
I'm really
annoying to switch.
diligent. So I would make sure everything is all lined up and working.
Oh yeah, well yeah, you could do it, Ernie, because if anybody could do it, you could do it. But I just like the cleanness of having separate files. But yeah, but we keep everything together, so it's a little simpler. We have to have a lot more communication because we have to agree on our priorities and all that. So
Yep.
there's downsides too, but I think it's
And
nice.
we'll put a link in the show description below for our budgeting together page because we
Yes.
actually have various ways that you can organize a budget with your partner. So you can take a look at those, actually see screenshots of an actual budget, give you some ideas there.
Yeah, it'd be good. We used to run a workshop just on that for a little while.
We did.
Yeah,
That was actually a pretty popular one.
yeah. We could probably bring that back at some point. That might be good. All right, last one that we have, and I really like this one, is setting up your structure by values. So This is where actually Nick True talked about this in a video. We'll link that in the description. And he actually talked about it on Budget Nerds when he was with us about a year ago. And I think Ashley L on the YouTube channel here, I think she does this as well. She was talking in a podcast with Jesse the other day that she does this. And what she said she did was she just kind of sat down and wrote out like, what are our family values, her and her partner, what's important to us. And it was just like a list of words like family, health, joy, giving, those kinds of things. And those values become the category groups. And then you kind of structure everything around that.
And so what I remember from the conversation with Nick that really stuck out about this structure is a category like eating out could show up in multiple groups.
Nick had actually a pretty complex structure, but he did it for the reporting. So he could have a eating out for family, and then like an eating out like for just like convenience, that kind of a thing. And I actually did that specifically. I talked about it in the Fresh Start episode. I separated eating out with family and eating out for dates, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't so much for a value thing. That was more for just to kind of protect. I guess it was actually, I guess it really was values, because what we were doing there is we were protecting the date money. And not making sure that we didn't go out too much with the kids, and that's more convenience, So, yeah.
My first thought when I thought a little bit about this structure is, boy, I would take advantage of this so bad. I would put eating out category in every one of those values.
You probably
looks like
could.
We're eating out every single day.
Right. Yeah, it's true. But it is interesting because it's a lot more work if you did that, because you'd have to say, not only you went out to eat, you have to say, okay, what was the purpose of this eating out, and you'd have to put it in that value group. But what's really cool is you have, at the end of the day, you have this report that says, okay, this is how much we spent on convenience. This is how much we spent on health, on our family values, things like that, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah. We talk a lot around YNAB about challenging assumptions. Mm-hmm. And I think with this, you're going to have to challenge a lot of assumptions, right? You're really going to have to prioritize, figure out what matters, and then align the money accordingly. So could be a good exercise for some folks.
Yeah. Especially if you're real nerdy and you don't mind the extra work of having multiple eating out categories or multiple, I can't think of another example, but multiple categories that are really the same thing, but they're different purposes, and different values attached to them. That's kind of neat. Well, I think that's all we got. We talked about half an hour about categories, and that's pretty good. I'm sure we'll talk about this for many, many hours more in future episodes of Budget Nerds.
And I'm sure we missed some pretty popular ways to, high level organize the budget. So drop those ideas, those thoughts in the comments section. Love to hear from you.
Yeah. So let's end off with another segment of YNAB Wins.
It was all in your mind.
Okay, our first win comes from Elizabeth, and Elizabeth wrote this on the Arbitrary Budget Rules video, which was a great video. Got a lot of good comments on that one. It's a little bit long, but I'm going to just read this whole thing because Elizabeth is preaching here, and it's awesome. So she said, for the first 2 years of YNAB, I had no margin, but then in that YNAB magic way, more money than I needed started to appear. I used to put whatever was left over into an extra income category until I heard on a YNAB podcast about how you're not getting the full value of Rule 3, my weakest rule, if you just pull from spare cash to cover any overspending. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. You don't feel the pinch of where you're pulling it from and haven't technically used Rule 1 if it just sits in extra. Since then, I have arbitrarily decided all dollars left over after true expenses and goals goes into a wish farm item. It's still the first category to get pilfered from, but at least I feel the pain of those dream boots getting further away every time I do. That is so, so good. If you follow Rule 1, you really can follow Rule 3, because you feel the trade-off if you actually know what you're
exactly what you're giving up. I love that.
That's huge. That's absolutely huge. I love that, Elizabeth.
All right, the win that I'm sharing, it comes from Marla. Marla commented on the 6 habits of successful YNABers. Wow, you guys are talking about things that are in my subconscious mind when I do the budgeting process, but I hadn't even thought to put them into words. I completely agree with you that what you were saying makes so much sense. Like making sure not to just leave some money to be budgeted, instead assigning it so that if you do need to move it, you know what you are giving up. Hadn't really thought it in that way. Great stuff.
Love it. Yeah, it's a lot
That's
like
awesome.
Elizabeth. So, it's funny because YNAB wins, they're not just like, oh, hey, I paid off this debt. Hey, I saved for a down payment on a house. A lot of them are like all in your brain, like just mindset shifts.
Yes.
Or like Marla said, sometimes it's just putting words to something that you kind of already have bopping around in your head. Now you know how to express it. And then because you know how to express that thought, you can actually do something about it. So I love that. I mean,
Cool.
like
Well,
I said, YNAB it's basically all it is just a bunch of mind hacks. That's really what it's all about. It's just changing the way you think about money.
and we would love to hear your YNAB win. So whatever the mind hack was, or if you actually did accomplish something like, funding a down payment on a house, paying off a debt, we'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, please. So put them in the comments and maybe we'll feature you in a future episode. But
Cool.
until then, happy budgeting, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Happy budgeting.
I'll see you later.